Catus Maximus here again. I'm doing a quick what's inside or teardown video of this Skil 2352 miniature one-handed circular saw. I had used it to open the package for my Harbor Freight Quinn electrical insulated pliers, and I got a couple comments on that. And it is, you know, a newer, cheaper, or cheap Skil tool, quote. But really, for all intents and purposes, this thing really isn't built that bad. It actually weighs a few pounds. It's fairly heavy. I don't know if I mentioned in the review, it does have a little carbide insert where it self-sharpens the blade. But let's go ahead and get inside this, and I'll explain what was going on with the charger too. I had to use an impact driver. This screw is a standard screw, so lefty-loosey, but it was a little tight, so I had to impact it out. To get the blade off, we'll do that first. Get that screw loose. It's kind of an interesting screw because, let's get a little zoom here. Here we go. You know, it's a big giant washer head. Here's the little blade. What is nice on this, as you can see, is you don't have to have the screw super tight because they use two steel pins to drive the physically or mechanically drive the blade. So you're not relying on pressure from the screw and friction to keep the blade from slipping. These blades are sharp. If we can get this one out. Oh, that's not super easy to get out of there. Just a second here. You just have to get it to slip above that. There's very little space in there, surprisingly enough. And then there's the drive spindle. You know, pretty simple, but it is a machine steel spindle. Let's go and get inside the unit itself. The blade is actually, as we can see here, surprisingly thick. Maybe 1/16 of an inch, a little less, maybe 32nd of an inch. But that's actually surprisingly robust. This little blade, where you think it's just a piece of sheet metal, is actually pretty thick, and I can't get it to flex at all. I don't want to try too hard and cut myself. As you can see, the bevel's in it. If we take a real close look, you can see that carbide self-sharpener does slightly roll the edge of the steel as this blade passes over it. But I think the self-sharpening is more if you get a nick in the blade, that little carbide bit will cut off the nick, and so at least will cut a little nicer. These little screws are #1 Phillips, and they're actually pretty darn tight. Whoop, right here. We do have 5 screws. I'm going to zoom back out. And they are really tight. You should listen to this. Holy mackerel, this is super tight. You can hear those little sounds. That's how tight these little screws are. You got to really make sure you have a nice screwdriver with a really sharp square, or with a very new tip on it. If you have any kind of an older screwdriver that has any kind of rounding, this will easily strip out. I'll show you what I mean. One of the biggest deals with Phillips is making sure you get a screwdriver tip that really fits just beautifully tight. And this is not magnetic. See that? It won't pick it up. But if you have a really tight fit, see, you'll hold the screw on. Whoop. And that's exactly what you want in these situations, or you'll end up with some strip screws, and they'll be effectively impossible to take out. You might be able to get an extractor down through these tiny little holes. If I could only learn to keep what I'm doing in frame, that might be nice. I'm going to pull out the rest of these screws here. Another quick note, I don't know if I showed on that screw, but evidence of how tight it is, look, the plastic is polishing the screw. It's that tight. There we go. We got those stubborn screws out. Pull apart the clamshell here. It's a little tighter on the head portion. Come on, cooperate. this case is surprisingly tight. You want to work these off kind of gently. There we go. So there's the inside of the case. We can see, maybe it's on the outside. So it says PA6 GF30. So it really is a nylon body with 30% glass fiber, just like any other heavy-duty tool. So that's surprising, even though this is pretty rigid. What they have here is on the back of the spindle, they do have a bronze bushing. That is not a needle bearing in there. But it's still not just in plastic, it is in a metal bushing. What's interesting is you can see they put a little flat on it so that the bearing wouldn't want to spin around in the plastic. That's actually an intelligent little touch. And here's the drive internals. And see, here's some other things. Even though you would think it's cheaper, it's not that bad. It's using a Samsung cell, an standard 18650. I don't know if the 13P. Let's get that little trigger switch out of there. Surprisingly enough, the trigger switch actually has two metal contacts, and it just touches two little pads on the bottom of the charging board. One nice thing about this is I found this at the thrift store. It didn't have a charger and it was dead. But looked up and found the chargers are like 5.5 volts or 6 volts. And since the whole charging circuit's actually inside the tool, I just wired up a little, brick power supply to a connector. And so that's how I'm able to charge it. It does have a thermal sensor to protect from the battery overheating, which is also a nice touch. And I don't know if I can really see. There we go. Try to get this tape up so I can see the rest of the numbers. 07. So it appears to be a 1.3 amp hour cell. So it's obviously not the highest capacity cell. Make sure that tape is down there tight. But being an 18650, you can go up to a 3 amp hour cell. You can even put in a LiFePO4 or a lithium ferrophosphate battery. And then you have an extra safe battery, and it would run as long as this little motor runs. These are standard little can motors, this being, a 3.5 volt or 4 volt motor. There are lots of little tools that you can retrieve motors from. And then here's our gearbox. As you can see, it does have metal gears. And if we really look close, we can actually see the spindle has a ball bearing, rubber sealed actually, and it's held in by 3 Phillips head screws. There's also a little snap ring under this gear. I would suppose you'd have to pull this gear off in order to get the spindle out, but it prevents it from wanting to shift back and forth. The spindle actually stays in position. As you can see, I can't get it to push in and out, and that's actually not bad either. There is no play back and forth in the spindle. That's surprisingly good. The little guard is held in by a screw, so you could pull off this guard if you ever really needed to. Let's take a quick look inside the reduction gearbox. We'll pull that off. Come on. And so what we can see is it's mostly metal, but the first stage gears are indeed plastic. And the second stage gears are metal. And some interesting little cutouts to get this to hold in there. That's kind of strange. And so that's about all there really is to the inside of a Skil. God, I was terrible at framing this video. This is not too terribly built a tool. I've been collecting gears from various cordless drills I've taken apart over the years. I'm going to go see if we can't actually do a little upgrade here. Just a minute. So as you go through garage sales and thrift stores, there's often cordless drills that are just old or dead or broken, and they're in a free bin or they're $1 or $2, and so I take them apart and get a bunch of, you know, gears, because I found enough times where I take apart these tools, plastic gears, that there's only so many sizes of gears, and oftentimes I've been able to upgrade tools. And taking apart cordless drills, I found some surprising grades of gears. Here's one gear that actually has a bronze bushing inserted into it. I've never seen that before except for these gears. I thought, wow, that's a extra quality. Imagine if all drills did something like that. And then you can find ones which are the next level, like these little guys here. Now see, these little gears have tiny little cage needle bearings in them. And so those are the best quality. And those are pretty rare to find too. Imagine if old cordless drills had needle bearing gearboxes. Alright, didn't have the right size gears. But that's just something to keep in mind if you're really into tools and you find ones like these, is that you can do little upgrades to them. Sorry about the weird little rambling video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.